going to kind of take us through some of the proposed changes. If you folks in the back cannot hear, you're welcome to come on up. Bring a chair if you like, or the chairs right here on the side. There's chairs over there next to Sandy. Because she might interview you for the press, but. All right.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the Board of Supervisors, Mr. Radesky. Good afternoon. Joanne Hunter, Director of Community Development. As the Chair indicated, this is a follow-up from our September 3rd Board of Supervisors meeting. The case was deferred till this meeting, and it is a conditional use permit, CU 2019-0011 for River Run Manor LLC, requesting a conditional use permit for a wedding and event venue. Just to remind everybody quickly through some of the background, the property is located on River Road West at 2421, which is just east of the Goochland Courthouse near Maidens. The property is zoned A2 as well as all the other surrounding properties, and places of public assembly are a conditional use permit in the A2 district. As you can see, the property is fairly large. It's about 55 acres. There's a large house that's located down towards the river, long drive, entryway drive into the property. The River Cliff subdivision is located immediately to the east, and then you can see to the north and the east, I think, is to the west, and to the north and east is, I would consider, a rural residential development. Just to remind everybody, this request is the conditional use permit for a place of public assembly. The applicant hopes to have a wedding and event center here. There are some permitted uses through the A2 district which would be allowed by right. They are not subject to this conditional use permit. So it is a single family residence. The applicant intends to live on the top floor of the structure. There will also be a bed and breakfast short-term rental hosted. As you recall, a few months ago, we revised, probably a year and a half ago now, time sort of runs together. But we revised our transient lodging, and we did allow bed and breakfasts if they're located in the house to be by right use. That would be limited to 10 units. And then a winery is a permitted use in the A2. Those three uses are not subject to this conditional use permit. This is only for the place of public assembly. To remind you, it's a very large home. You can see here the pictures. The top picture is the front picture facing towards Route 6, and the rear is the closest to the riverside. And then this is the patio where they have talked about having some outdoor events. And the property to the top left is the pool house, another location where the applicant has talked about having some events. So I wanted to show you some distances to where it is in terms of other residential uses. There are two properties in the River Cliff subdivision. One house is 700 feet from the tennis courts. One house is 730 feet from the pool area. River Road West is about 2,300 feet away, and the south bank of the river is about 1,000 feet away. At the Board of Supervisors meeting where we held this public meeting, which was September 3rd, we had 10 speakers speak in support of the application. 10 speakers were opposed, and one speaker was generally neutral. Tried to identify what the concerns were of all the speakers who were opposed to it. One was the conflict with covenants. Again, I think the county attorney reminded you at that time that is a private matter that the county does not get involved with. Impacts on the rural character, that took a couple of different forms from couple of different speakers, but anywhere from they don't believe this is an appropriate location to a commercial use. They feel like the traffic would negatively impact Route 6 and items like that. And then the three other last outstanding concerns are things that we are trying to address through conditions. And those deal with number of events, hours of events, and amplified sound. The board made a valiant effort on Tuesday night to try to wordsmith these conditions, but I think rightfully so, and thank you, since we have to administer them deferred, so we can sort of think about it, make sure they are enforceable and not create problems for the planning and zoning office. Just to give you background for the opposition, because the opposition has been fairly consistent throughout. When we had the community meeting, the concerns were loud music and noise, traffic, parking, lighting, things like that. At the planning commission, we had 6 citizens speak in opposition, and again, their concerns were parking, lighting, noise, music, and traffic. So we've been hearing the same concerns throughout the process. I did hand out 2 items today. You have a revised resolution, which is with yellow highlights. It should have 3 different yellow highlights. Those are changes to the conditions that I have made since it went out to you on Friday, and on Thursday, and since it was put on the web. So you'll see that, and then I also handed out the chart. The chart's going to be on the screen for everybody to see, but it may be easier for you to follow along at your place there. So we do like to compare all of our uses to other places of public assembly. So this is sort of a summary of all of our places of public assemblies that have been approved in the last recent years. So River Run Manor is the one in white, is the one that we are proposing. Todd, can you turn the lights down a little bit? Is it hard to see the
They
slide?
don't dim, but I think maybe I'll turn some off.
Okay, thank you. The yellow ones are Dover Hall. You can see there's 2 different approvals. In 2013 they came in. We had a little stricter standards. After their 5-year period, they did improve themselves, and we relaxed some standards in 2018. We did the same for Bandits Ridge. We had a 2016 permit, a 2017 permit. We have Running Mare, and then the Adams School. So you can see many of them include the same type of uses, the wedding venue with an associated bed and breakfast or an associated residence. The applicant in this case has both of those. The limit of the number of guests, with this one, it's 299. Dover Hall was 400. That includes 299 inside and up to 400 if you allow some outside. Bandits Ridge was limited to 150. Running Mare 200, and the Adams School 700. The hours of operation, this was not on the slide last time. I did add that since that seemed to be one of the concerns that was discussed at the community meeting. So when you see Running Mare, there are often 3 categories. So I want to explain that a little bit. You'll see 3 boxes in the white on the bottom. The first one is what was proposed with the original condition. The middle block is what was proposed, we think, at 1 o'clock in the morning, what our understanding of the condition was. And then the last block would be what staff's recommendation would be based on hearing all the facts and the public hearing the other night. So for hours of operation for River Run Manor, the original proposal was 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. Monday through Saturday, and Sunday 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. The motion on the 3rd did not recommend any changes, and then we were concurred that no outdoor activities after 11, and it would be Monday through Saturday 8 to 11, Sunday 9 to 9. You can see there's a range of start times, but the end time is all pretty consistent, 10 o'clock during the week and 11 o'clock on weekends. These are the 2 conditions that we spent the most amount of time on. It's the limit of the number of activities that can occur and the amplified sound. So I did put these on the same slide since I figured we would be spending the most. Again, you see 3 columns for River Run Manor, the original condition, the 9-3 motion, and the staff revised. So what was proposed with the original when it first went out is that they could have 1 main event plus 1 accessory event related to that, and that would account as 1 for 1 event. However, that, we did limit that event to a 2-hour period. So that meant if somebody had to have a rehearsal dinner prior to, they could have that for a 2-hour period, and then either later that day or the next day have an event, and that would all count as one event. We did try to expand that with the 9-3 motion. We did limit it to 40 events per year. There could be 2 related events over a 3-day period where there's less than 85 people. And we have added no amplified music for accessory events. And then you can see Dover Hall has 60 a year, less than 250. They can only have 1 event a month over $299. We did increase the less than 50 a year to 80 times a year for their second renewal. Bandits Ridge can have one weekend and 1 weekday. It was changed to them being allowed to have 1 event per day. Running there is 1 per week, and Adams School is 60 a year, greater than 50 people. In terms of amplified sound, in the original condition, we had that it could only occur during the weddings and processionals, and inside an enclosure, and there was an orientation condition in there. The motion that was discussed at the meeting was that you could have it during the ceremony, plus from Sunday to Thursday, you could have amplified music outside from 4 to 7, and on Friday and Saturday, 4 to 10. The staff's recommended condition, based on hearing all the comments and looking at all the conditions for all the other uses, is that we would clarify that they can have amplified music for the processional, the recessional, and the ceremony. So when they walk in, they can play amplified music. While they have the ceremony, the minister or whoever's proceeding over the event, and when they walk out, they can have amplified music. However, that would be the end of the amplified music for 40 of the 40 events. However, they can choose 6 of those events can have amplified music. It would be up to them to decide whether that was during a cocktail hour or anything, any type of event. And if they had amplified music, it would be limited to a 4-hour period, and it would need to end by 10. We also modified.
Just a clarification, that's outdoor amplified, indoor.
Yes, outdoor
Is that
amplified.
tented?
It can either be in a tent or just outside.
So 40 events.
No, 6 events.
40 events, but only 6 can have amplified music. Of the 40, only
Outside of the
6.
ceremony and the wedding
Yes.
procession.
Mr. Chairman, this might be a good, I think what we're talking about is a question I had. What is the how do we define temporary structure? Because it seems like that's what you've replaced in here is a temporary structure. That seems like a key phrase in here. Can you, how do we define temporary structure?
The way it is in Dover Hall and some of the other ones, when they come in and put up those white, those large white tents, and then they have to have all the flaps down, but that is a temporary structure. It requires a building permit and the whole bit.
So is that somewhere defined? Is temporary structure defined in a way that we can enforce, or we can enforce what you just described?
Yes, we're comfortable that we can enforce it. Again, the only temporary structure in the building code is that type of tent.
But one of the things that the applicant has said all along is flaps down. So I don't want to.
And the condition does say the flaps are down.
Not
Not
anymore,
in
it's
the
struck through.
revised.
Struck there. And our thing was 6 times a year. It doesn't matter if the applicant had kept indicating that they wanted to have a cocktail hour on the terrace. If they wanted to have that as one of their 6 events, they're welcome to do it. If they wanted to have it in a tent over the tennis courts, they're welcome to do that. It's their choice of how they use the 6 times a year amplified music. That was the intention of the staff condition. We have gotten some concerns from the neighbors in some emails over the last few days that they don't believe a tent would provide any noise relief.
So we're basically treating a tent as being outdoors.
In the revised staff
In the revised.
condition, yes. We also did revise the orientation language. Before it said that the music amplification devices shall be oriented south and east. And we specifically said that it would be directed toward the river and away from all adjoining residential, not just River Cliff, because there are other residential uses. So you can see there's a variety of ways that amplified music is permitted. When Dover Hall first came through, we did not allow any amplified music. After they went through their 5-year period and proved themselves a little bit, we did change it where they can have amplified music in an enclosure, which would allow a tent. Bandit Ridge, it has to be in an enclosure. And in Running Mare, it's changed to there's no amplified music can be audible from the property line. The only changes that were made to the chart, based on this one, benchmark that, because that came up in one of the neighbors' emails and concerns. We did verify that Bandit's Ridge had a specific condition that they were not allowed to have events on Memorial Day or Labor Day when residents may be outside enjoying their yards. The email request from the nearby resident had suggested no activities on Christmas Eve, Christmas, or Easter. So we did add that, but no other changes on the slide. So I'm going to run through those conditions, all of them, just so you can get a whole picture of it. And then there's several conditions, the 3 conditions where there are sort of a buffet option. We typically do not like to, give you many different options. We try to be clear. However, there are maybe some differing opinions, and we wanted you to have language for all 3 options, whichever way you decide to go, so that we're not trying to wordsmith at the last minute. So the first one is important. So this is the use. The use is weddings, rehearsal dinners, retirement parties, other social events, charitable events, and similar activities. So those are the types of uses that would be allowed with this permit. The conceptual plan improvements will be conformed to the conceptual plan. The conceptual plan shows where the parking would be located. Plan of development the CUP activity cannot occur until a POD is approved. There are some questions about the driveway access. The driveway through the POD, that would be analyzed and reviewed. It would need to meet public safety requirements, which requires a 20-foot driveway able to hold 75,000 pounds. That would need to occur from Route 6 all the way to the house. It appears that from Route 6 to the gate is about 20 feet wide. The gate narrows a little bit, and then the road's only about 12 feet wide from the gate to the home. So through the POD process, the applicant would need to make some improvements to get it up to fire safety standards. The applicant would need to provide 75 parking spaces and then an overflow area. Through this conditional use permit, the board would be waiving the requirements for the parking areas to be paved. Would allow gravel, which is consistent with the agricultural and residential character of the area. This is where I was just talking about the access road. So the applicant would need to expand that driveway area to a manner satisfactory to the fire rescue and community development office, as I just indicated. They could have one sign, 32 square feet. They'd have to do a lighting plan. The limit of guests is 29. 299. Thank you. That's a big difference. And now we're starting to get into the conditions where there's going to be a couple of different options for the board to talk through once I'm done. So again, the original condition, the motion discussed, and the staff CUP would be limited to 40 primary events a year. The primary events are limited to 299 attendees. I'm reading from the third paragraph, if anybody's not following where I am. And then in addition to the primary event, you could have 2 related accessory events limited to 85 attendees, and if they can occur over 3 consecutive days, and amplified music would not be permitted for any of the accessory events.
Do we need to add outdoor amplified music?
Outdoor.
Yes,
That's for correct.
yes. So here are the original hours, 8 to 11 and 9 to 9. We did change that from Sunday to Thursday. They would be able to operate 8 a.m. to 10 p.m. and Friday and Saturday 8 a.m. to 11 p.m. However, we do have, under the amplified music, some stop times for the outdoor amplified music. And this is the original condition. This was the 9.3 condition. I'm going to review the staff's recommendation. Subwoofers are prohibited. Amplified sound, including speech, music, or other noise, is prohibited outdoors except as following. So again, the processionals, the ceremony, and the recessional can have amplified music. Of the 40 events, amplified sound is permitted outside or in a temporary structure up to 6 times per calendar year. Outdoor amplification is limited to a 4-hour period and must end by 10 p.m. And then C deals with the orientation, as I indicated, that the device would be oriented towards the river and specifically directed away from any residential properties. I think 13 to 19, we didn't have any recommended changes to the conditions, but however, the conditional use permit, if approved, would require the applicant to hire one uniformed security guard anytime they have alcohol, music, and more than 100 guests. When alcohol is served, they have to meet all the conditions of the ABC board. Fireworks are prohibited. The traffic impact analysis, right now, VDOT had said no road requirements would be required. We would, after a 12-year period of operation, we would want to go back and take a look at 12 months, I'm sorry. 12 months, look at how the use had been operating, has the number of accidents increased, different things like that. Do a TIA at that time and see if any road improvements are needed. This use would require to be work with the zoning administrator and provide a list of all their events. We're recommending a 5-year CUP condition that would be to 2024. We have our standard transfer release condition, and then these are 2 new conditions, and I've spelled firearms wrong, so sorry about that. That's when you're trying to do things too quickly. But added conditions 20, fire holidays excluded, cup activities shall not occur on Christmas Eve, Christmas, or Easter. And again, we had gotten a concern from a neighbor about firearms. I think they had put in some information for a duck hunting or something like that as a groom event. So the discharge of firearms is prohibited during any CUP activity. So that's all the changes I have. I'm sure you have questions for me. I'd be happy to answer them.
And I just want to clarify that the resolution on the table before you shows all of the changes that staff is recommending with the exception of the firearms. So that one it has been shown you on the screen and is part of staff's recommendation. That is the only one not on the amended resolution in front of you.
Okay, questions for Ms. Hunter?
So Ms. Hunter, just for clarification, I know we didn't go over this before, item 13 on the uniform security, item B, 13B, one uniform's okay, including, let me see, events, including music, alcohol, and more than 100 guests. So that the music is inside or outside.
That's correct.
Any music,
any music.
so they could have the piano player. Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Piano player on Monday, yes. Okay.
Kind of a related question. Anybody in Gushman can request a large crowd permit,
Yes,
right?
sir. Mhm.
Do we limit CUP holders to not get large crowd permits?
If they wanted to operate in an activity that was over and above their CUP permit, they could get
So they
a
could,
special.
so they could come in and say, we're gonna have a wedding that's gonna be 500 people, and they would go through the CUP processing.
Not the CUP
I
process,
mean,
just
the
this.
large crowd process.
Yes, sir.
That's nothing new, that's always been there.
I do believe Dover Hall might have done that one time, I may be recalling more from it.
That was the only one for years.
No. It was sort of a big deal when, Mickey Hall first started, and they didn't have all the permits, and so that's how they got crowds in. Mr. Lumpkins, you have questions, comments?
Sure, a couple questions. Has the applicant given you their response to these latest?
Yes, we did, they had concerns with, the one, they asked us to add the recessionals, which was when people walk out. We did believe that was appropriate, so we added that. I know they would prefer a 5-hour, time frame for, the music. They, would like to have the condition where they can have music, amplified music for a cocktail hour and have that be included as part of their wedding ceremony. So I think they would like to have no limit or a 3-hour time limit on cocktail hours so that they can have outdoor amplification.
So do you have, can you go to condition 12? And let's see. Okay, so on our agenda online, the applicant's concerns, you don't have the applicant's concerns up here, but you have them on,
In the staff
Yeah,
report.
On
it's
the
in
staff
your
report.
staff report, but I did not put it here.
okay.
It's page 14 of the staff report.
Yep.
Packet
Packet
page
page 14.
14.
I could read it, this is what the applicant had indicated for 12B during primary events. Amplified sound is permitted outside or in a temporary structure from 4 to 7. In addition, up to 6 times per calendar year, amplified sound is permitted outside or in a temporary structure. In all cases, outdoor amplification is limited to a 4-hour period and must end by 10 p.m. So they would like to have the opportunity to have amplified sound for every event and then 6 additional events as well. And they had indicated in one email that perhaps the time change should be 12 instead of 4, so in case somebody wanted to have a daytime wedding.
12 noon.
12 noon, yes.
All right. So I think the matrix kind of confused me at first.
Yeah.
Go back to number 11,
Yeah.
and let's make sure that, I think the matrix might have been a little off, but that's okay. Number 11 is.
He doesn't mean in the matrix.
No, not the matrix, I'm sorry. Number 11, I'm not worried about the matrix.
Those are the hours.
Yes,
No.
and so what we're looking at is original.
That is not hours for music, that is hours
No,
for
just
events.
I am talking about events. So is the recommendation the same as what we're looking up here?
Yes,
Could you go ahead and scroll down to the, I think you have another,
this is the only slide for hours of
I
events.
thought it wasn't the one that, oh, are you sure?
Yeah.
Keep,
Hey, it's not 1 in the morning.
go, yeah. Go.
I know.
So what was slide 20? That's 17. Okay.
10 PM, there's the time.
Are- Well, I want to just be clear, so what we're looking at, the motion, the time that we're talking about, as it's presented to us right now, is Sunday through Thursday, 8 to 10, Friday and Saturday, 8 to 11. That's the bottom line where we are now, right?
Yes, for hours for events.
Hours for events, great, okay. All right, I'm straight on that. So temporary structures, what was the reason for taking out tent with flaps and just replacing it with temporary structure?
In which condition the staff
12,
recommended? or
12, it
yours?
goes from what was discussed to the staff recommendation. I think you've taken out if I'm seeing it,
Yes, that was removed because the applicant had indicated that at times they may want to have their outdoor amplification on the patio for a cocktail hour. They've also discussed the possibility of tenting the tennis courts. My thought was it doesn't really matter what or where they want to have the amplified music in. If they have it on the patio, that's fine, it doesn't need to be in a tent, but those outdoor amplification would be limited to 6 times per year. It gives them the flexibility where they can choose how to use those 6.
okay. And is the,
Not the ceremony, music. That could be a 4-hour period and it ends by 10. If they choose to put that on the patio for a cocktail hour, or if they choose to put that on the tennis court as a full outdoor wedding or at the pool, that's their decision. But it can only occur 6 times per year for a 4-hour period.
so, I think I get it. So, I mean, that's basically 24 hours a year they can have during ending by 10. And so this allows them to do a middle of the day event, right, with amplified music, an amplified cocktail hour at noon to 2 or whatever.
If they choose to do that, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chair, can we go back to the confusing matrix or whatever?
I'm sorry the matrix confused you.
Brad, I thought it was helpful to see this, side by side.
I didn't say it wasn't helpful. It's helpful. I just think I thought the first hours of operation were very long. Sorry.
We're trying to work through that, then. We just need to spend more time with it.
We have till 1 in the morning.
Okay, here, just as for me, there's really 2 things I'm focusing on, is the noise and the intensity of the use, because the rest of it takes care of itself. So if we stay with the noise first, amplified sound, if you just look at the right half of that bottom, we've sought to address the noise issue in the past through enclosures, orientation, ceremonies, indoors, or measuring the impact of the property line.
Correct.
My concern is if we go with outdoor amplified and nothing else, we're not using any of these mitigation processes. Am I right in understanding that none of these other ones are allowed any outdoor amplified music outside of an enclosure, with no enclosure, other than possibly measuring it at the property line to make sure that it's not impacting the neighbors?
And then that enclosure may include a tent.
Right.
And we got concerns with this specific one that a tent didn't matter, so,
To them or the neighbors?
to the neighbors.
The neighbors don't care about the tent?
They did not feel like that would be,
That would make a difference.
yeah.
But we use that. But
We use that
We use that.
As a mitigation.
consistently.
We use that 10 as an abatement feature.
It's abatement.
We
I
can
guess-
add that back in if the board is on
I
board
guess what we're
with that.
saying in this case is, our abatement is 6 times a year versus 40 times a year with a tent. It's really what I think this boils down to. I believe I was just at a wedding, well, this weekend, but that one didn't have this kind of thing. It was at a regular church, but my niece's wedding about 2 months ago was outdoors. The reception, the pre-dinner event was also outdoors, and then we went into a tent. And there was a big difference between being in the tent and being outside as far as the music went. I mean, I took many breaks outside just to let my ears rest for a minute. So there was a big difference outdoors. Just stepping out of the tent with the flap open, the music was a lot less noticeable. You could hold a conversation right outside the tent, but you couldn't really hold inside. So I think the tents do help, but it seems to me like what you guys are proposing, what we've kind of come to here is limiting it to 6 times a year versus having more opportunities for music with tents, with some kind of barrier. I know we closed the public hearing. Would you all like to hear anything from the applicant or the neighbors?
It would suit me fine, but it's the pleasure of the board, but I would welcome.
Oh, okay. Would you like to say anything, Woody?
Thank you all for your time. I know this is another continuation.
You can come up.
Come on.
Just a quick thought. I think what's making it confusing with the chart, and again, this is from working at many other places, and there is not typically restrictions put on any ceremony-related sound. So if you look at the rest of the chart and what else is done in Goochland, there's not references related to the ceremony itself. We're fine with having them in there if it makes the neighbors more comfortable. Certainly that's something we're happy to do, but I think that's part of what's causing the confusion is that in a wedding celebration, it's the ceremony, which in the paperwork it's broken out as processional, ceremony, and recessional. So it looks like 3 different things, but that's all the ceremony. So that's part of the confusion there. And then the cocktail hour, which is sort of the gray area when they're taking their pictures before a reception or a dinner starts. That's the primary thing that we are continuing to ask not be limited, and that was the reason that the 4 to 7 p.m. be put in place, so that basically anything done prior to 7 p.m. would be more feasible for the neighbors, that the music be amplified. And then the reception itself, certainly those for any outdoor events, we would be happy if we have to limit to 6, although that certainly does not meet what is on the rest of the chart, so it's holding us to a different standard, which again, we're happy to do for the initial, whatever we need to do to make the neighbors happy and comfortable with us moving forward. But in the paperwork, it shows every reception as a 4-hour period. And that's fine if it's the reception only, but if cocktail hour is included in that period of time, it should be 5 hours. So cocktail hours are 1 hour typically while the families are taking pictures, and a reception is always 4. And that's the way the band contracts are done, and the DJ contracts, they're based on a contracted time frame of 4 hours for a reception, and then they pay more for having them for cocktail hour. So I think that's what's causing the confusion, is that the ceremony is not restricted in other places on the chart, but it is here, and then cocktail hour we need to nail down where that falls. And so when we were together Tuesday night, our concession for that was, okay, it doesn't have to go past 7 PM, but we would like for that to be included in what is potential for outdoor music up till 7 PM. And then at which time a 4-hour period would end at 10 if it was outdoors. I don't know if y'all have any questions about that.
I'm sorry, could you put the 12, the condition 12 up there again?
This was the original one, this one was the one that was discussed, and then this is staff recommendation.
Okay,
Which would you like?
let's stick there. All right, Ms. Meady, if I may ask you a couple of questions. What are your objections to 12B? Are you, we're set on the 40 events. That's not an issue, right? You want amplified music outside or in a temporary structure 6 times a year. You're okay with the 6 times a year?
We could see to it to make everybody happy
Okay.
to do what we
All right.
need.
And then how about, did you want to, because I shared with you an email from a neighbor and you replied to it, and so that reply, you said something about ending at 7. So tell me about that last, you still want to be able to go till 10?
We were asking for, so we've already conceded to a limit at 10 PM. So
For
we're
the
asking
6
that
events,
this-
for the 6 events, you end at 10.
Right.
Okay. What is your,
Music ends, not the event.
The event ends at 10
Yeah,
and the
the
music.
event
I
ends
think
at 10.
if I could try to clarify, because we've had these numerous conversations, the applicant would like to consider that a cocktail hour be considered part of the ceremony. We have been very clear, maybe the matrix doesn't show it, but all the other ones, we have been very clear that the only time they can have amplified is during the ceremony. We would not consider a cocktail hour part of the ceremony. So I think that's where the push-pull is.
and that's what's causing us the 40 event, 6 event split, having to split it into events like that to allow some outdoor cocktail hours, but limit it to 6 times a year.
Well, the 6 would be for receptions. What we've been asking for since the first meeting was cocktail hours not have any limitations other than the end time of 7 PM.
I believe the applicant wants everything that's on there, plus outdoor amplified sound for any event stopping by 7. Everything that's there, plus the 1 hour that will stop by 7 for a cocktail hour.
The 1 hour
It's
after the
a
ceremony.
3-hour,
1 hour after the
Well-
4
ceremony.
to 7.
Or, it's certainly an add, I don't want to discount that. She's also asking for in A, to add cocktail hours and then time that section 4 to 7 plus B.
Yes,
Is that,
one way or the other, she's asking to add cocktail hours between 4 and 7 to any event, plus those 6 events, which could be entirely outdoors, yep.
Outside amplified music, not in a tent.
Yes.
4 to 7 and 6 to 10, that's 7 hours. Ms. Whitty, could you clarify that? You mentioned 4 to 7 and then 4 hours ending at 10, that's 6 to 10. That's a total of 7 hours, is that? Is it 7 hours with permission, outside amplified unattended music? No? Okay, help me through that then.
I think that suggestion was made so that there was a tighter, 4 to 7 isn't what we asked for, it was just something that was suggested to kind of impose a start and stop.
Are you actually looking for 1 hour ending by 7?
Yes, ma'am.
So I think what we're saying is we're adding an hour to the end of a ceremony with music.
For 40 times a year. Up to 40 a year.
for every event?
40 times a year.
request.
It's a request.
I thought outdoor amplifier was only 6 times a year.
No,
They're
the
requesting.
request is 40.
Outdoor amplifier 40 times a year.
Right. The
In
request is
addition to
40.
6. Well, the 6 is part of the 40.
If we do 40, then the 6 is kind of no point.
Well, no, I'm not so sure.
Ceremony, that's right.
Not,
yes.
I'm not so sure that's the case, because I thought maybe you wanted to end everything by 7. You were willing to end all outdoor amplification by 7, but you still want at least 6 times a year to be able to go till 10 with outside amplification.
Correct.
Okay.
So the concept is that 6 times, what the applicant sees is that concept is that 6 times is the opportunity to have a whole reception outdoors or under a tent. But regardless of that reception event, which is that 6 times, she would like for every wedding to also be able to have 1 hour of outdoor music. So that's where you say,
So Ms. Modesti is correct, the change would be to 12A, is it would say weddings, ceremonies, recessionals, and a 1-hour cocktail hour.
That can't go past 7.
right,
That is accurate. That was the applicant's request. We were trying to balance the concerns with the motion that we heard last time, and that's where we came up here. The applicant doesn't concur with the staff's recommendation.
And that's what I was just trying to get.
I think we felt like we conceded to the 40 as well as the end time and a couple other things, so it was never our intent to abandon their ability to have an outdoor cocktail hour on the terrace immediately following the ceremony.
So here's another thought. Could it be limited to the terrace?
Sure.
You mentioned that that's what you like. I think the terrace would be beneficial because the house would be blocking most of the sound. The terrace is in the back of the house. It would be blocking all the sound going north, as much as brick can do that. And so the majority of the sound would carry towards the river. I know one of the original things we talked about was having flaps at the end of the terrace. And I guess that's a possibility.
Mr. Chairman, can I ask a clarification? We've been focusing on this amplified outdoor sound piece, and rightly so. It's been a concern of the neighbors. Does the terrace music have to be amplified?
I think so it's long and narrow, so the way I would envision it happening is that the musician would sit, like if it's a violinist or a harpist, she would sit with her back to River Cliff and project either just towards the river or kind of angled so that the sound can travel. But I don't think that it's gonna be heard on the opposite side of the terrace if it's not amplified. Live music obviously will travel slightly better than a DJ without amplification. But my concern was for the couples who don't have it in their budget to have a live musician and they're having the same DJ that's DJing their wedding reception also do their ceremony and their cocktail hour, and there's no live musician. I want to make sure that they have an option to have an outdoor cocktail hour. I know it's so complicated.
I believe Mr. Coleman counseled you originally that we don't use the term cocktail hour,
Right.
the term of art and planning, and you probably don't use some of the terms we use
Right.
in wedding planning. I think that's where Joanne got to, was trying to hem it into something that can actually be managed and measurable. Still not sure what the residents nor this board's comfortable with these recommendations or thoughts, but it was trying to find a way to get something more manageable.
Right now, it's just not addressed, so either in 12A or 12B, but it's not shown up there for either one. So that's my concern, is that they could have a ceremony outside and then 6 times a year have a reception outside, but it doesn't cover what happens for cocktail hour.
It is, it's addressed in 12B. You have, if you wanna have amplified, it's in 12B. Choose 6 times a year to use that as your cocktail hour or as an outdoor reception. And I mean, that's pretty consistent with what we have been saying all along, that outdoor amplification
20 of those could be outdoor cocktail hours, or
It'll be hard to track, but what are your thoughts, Sean?
I think we hear what we've heard staff recommendation, we hear what the applicant wants. I think we'll talk about it. Right?
I guess one more question before you, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind. For any of the outdoor amplified, what mitigation would you consider appropriate to minimize, I guess to help make sure that the sound that's leaving the property isn't disturbing? What mitigation would you consider to be reasonable?
are you saying for a cocktail hour or reception, or what are your?
Outdoor amplified music?
So on the original of what we submitted before the last meeting, it showed, the locations where we wanted to host events throughout the property. And if I'm not mistaken, cocktail hour was limited to just the terrace and the front of the house, I believe. So with the terrace side, certainly it could be a tent wall, you know, that's protecting that, and then the musician would sit with their back to that. And for the reception aspect, to me, it's the same as what it always has been as far as Ms. Hunter's recommendation about the indoor, like inside of the tent enclosure. Is that what you're asking?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've used different mitigation methods in the past, either orientation, enclosure, indoor only, measuring the sound of the property lines, different ways to come at it. We're trying to design something that doesn't restrict you from doing what you need to do, but at the same time mitigates it to the point where it's not intrusive or disruptive. And so in trying to figure out what the right solution there is in terms of providing the mitigation without undue restraints on your ability to do business, I was looking for which of those things that we've used in the past might be most appropriate. It could be on the tennis court, fully enclosed, on the patio, enclosed at both ends. I mean, it could be, you know, mitigation that might help that way. I'm having a real tough time getting behind outdoor amplifier with no mitigation and no measurement and no way to assess. I'm having a tough time, especially the first time out. That's a little, we haven't done that in the past, and we have gotten some feedback in the past that the mitigation efforts weren't sufficient. And to abandon all mitigation efforts, I'm having a tough time with that. So I was trying to get some comfort that there are some efforts here that would provide us some comfort that we're not going someplace that we shouldn't. So that's the line.
I guess the approach we've taken is the limitation to 6 times per year.
Is the mitigation.
Is the mitigation. So we're saying 6 times a year we're going to allow.
So if you're gonna change that, then you gotta start at it. Mitigation.
If you get 40 times. Yeah. If you go back to outdoor amplified and now 40 times, then you
That's
get
why I thought,
6 times.
I thought if it's restricted to the terrace, I think the terrace would do a lot. The house itself would do a lot to mitigate, probably more than a tent. I think it would push the kind of the sound towards the river. But I'm not a sound expert.
And keep in mind that the fact that any outdoor sound has to be amplified towards the river is a condition that overrides all of it. That orientation it occurs for all of the outdoor amplification. So number C.
Yeah, it sounded like at one end of the terrace projecting across the terrace was not toward the river. It may be kind of toward the river, but it's kind of.
Well, I mean, C requires it to be oriented toward the river.
So then that's going to be tough for the folks at the other end of the terrace to hear if you have to project straight toward the river. But anyway, I'm sorry.
I think it's
Did you
one
have
of those
some-
things we won't know till we check it, but we'll follow whatever conditions are implemented. You know, we don't want to be bad neighbors, and I think that's the concern for River Cliff in general, and then the neighbors up and down River Road is we want to make sure that they understand we're sensitive to it. It's hard to check these things until it's happening. So our plan was, we thought we were closing last Friday, and we were going to spend some time next week with some sound guys out on the site doing the checks at the addresses on River Cliff in the loop, and kind of gauging what is appropriate and not appropriate at the property line, at their homes, and the Smith's entrance, you know, that type of thing. We want to be good neighbors, I mean, that's our intent, so. But I understand you all have to do it in a different way, you know, the CP guidelines are.
Mr. Chairman, a lot of other times that kind of activity is done by the applicant, either before you're getting to this decision point, or, and so if they're asked to adopt some type of language, it has to be something that can be measurable to be enforced through our CUP enforcement tool as well. And so I take full understanding that you want to be a good neighbor and those kinds of things, and we'll potentially mitigate those kinds of things. Sometimes when we write policy, we also have to think about worst case scenarios and how do we manage it. Because not everybody is a good neighbor, and I think that's what we're trying to find, that balance right now.
We've checked amplified sound with the decibel meter, and you hear it, but it's certainly not louder than the train. So on that site, we had done checks. The neighbors were not involved in it, but we were, and the decibel meters where it reads towards the property line was something that the county felt like it was difficult to enforce, obviously, because it would require somebody being at the property line late hours during reception. That wasn't feasible. So, you know, our response to that, and to try to be sensitive, was to provide a drawing of these are the locations on the site where we're proposing we would have cocktail hour and receptions if they were allowed to be outside, or during the ones that were allowed to be outside. So.
Let's let
Well, maybe I'll hold a comment.
Mr. Massey, did you want to say anything?
Yeah, I was chatting just the other day, thank you for giving me a chance to speak, and with Buddy Ford, who's been in that subdivision for a long time. And I said, you know, as a practical matter, Dad's had a lot of parties there, and outside of the gunfire, and one of them that he wasn't at, has there been any complaints from neighbors about the sound? He said he's never heard a complaint. And I don't, you know, know how sensitive they were, but there were numbers of weddings. Of course, some of it was inside too.
Hopefully not gunfire.
That's a separate issue.
I don't want to know.
There was a wild person living in the house for a while, and I wasn't part of it, but the guy that sort of manages the house said, if the people in Thorncliffe could survive him, they could survive anything. He was the gunfire, and tires racing around. But you know, I just like things like simple things like the lawnmower. We're out there with the lawnmower, you know, 15, 16 hours every other week, and you know, great big old lawnmower running up and down, and I can't imagine the weddings will be worse than the lawnmower.
I think we all kind of expect to hear tractors and lawnmowers. I think that the concern with the sound, with the music, is really nighttime, when you don't hear the lawnmowers either. And so we just need to figure out the best way to manage that. I was just at a wedding, as I mentioned earlier, on Saturday, and the reception was in a restaurant, and the sound, of course, they had the woofers going. I was in the next room, and I could feel my feet vibrating on the floor. I couldn't tell if my heart was beating or not, but
We're glad it was.
We're eliminating subwoofers, but anyway, any more questions for the applicant? Thank you. Any other discussion? I'm going to let some of the citizens tell us what they think of what they've heard, and any other thoughts.
I don't think we thought we could talk today, so.
Well,
But we can, right?
yes, we're opening it up for you.
back of the building to show where she's talking about putting her music? Because I don't think they could fit a tent on the terrace.
No,
How do you talk about the
it
tenant?
would be a
Could-
tent.
Be intended.
Citizens, welcome to hear from you. If you would, as you do at the board meeting, give your name, please, as you start to speak.
Don Kraske, 1509 Riverview. My house is the third in the row of houses on that picture, but it doesn't seem to show for some reason, so. But we have a direct view at the side of the building.
This is where they're talking about, up at the, talked about earlier was about having,
Because that has to stay open for egress, and this would be best to leave it open and use the building as a backer for like a sound barrier. So I think that's why I was struggling to answer your question a second ago about what things we could put into place. So on the middle slide, here is where it would be, and then on this one, it would be here.
Can I address that? My name is Susan Smith, 2370 River Road West. My background is commercial interiors, and I know it sounds like I'm coming over your side. In a way, I am. I want to tell you what you can do is you can get a panel, a series of folding panels that will absorb sound on the terrace there.
We'd be happy to do that.
Well, I'm just saying, rather than a tent flap, it's permanent, you can store it, but I don't know how much it would absorb, but it's a very good way
I'm
to store
familiar.
it. No, I was gonna address something your wife mentioned. Carol Rice is Don's wife, and they live, of course, where Don said they did. She mentioned something in an email she sent out, and I thought it was interesting, and she said there's about an hour breakdown after these events that can be fairly loud. Kim, I don't know, you probably ought to address that, because I know there's a catering trucks leave, the van leaves, people leave, cars rev up, around the driveway. And that usually is a fairly long process, correct? Which could be a concern for the neighbor.
Is it okay to do it from here, or?
yeah, come on up.
Okay.
Better.
I hate
We
to
have
have
the
my back while I
recorder.
answer you.
The recorder is right here. That's
Oh, okay, gotcha. So to answer your question, no, that's perfect. Breakdown is typically on a production schedule allowed to be an hour long after an event. The first thing that cuts is the music. The DJ, band, whoever it is, they start to unplug right away. The majority of things are broken down, put away, and off the site in 40 minutes in my experiences. Rentals and that type of thing are not picked up until Monday. Unless you're at a place like Tuckahoe Plantation, something like that that has another event the following day, which ours would not because it's one primary per weekend, basically. So we would not be in a situation where we were turning over that space. So the breakdown usually would be about 40 minutes on the schedule. There's an hour left for it. It is not any amplified sound during that time. All of that is usually cut during the last dance. So for a reception that ends at 11, the amplified music would totally end at 10:53. And then the process is you load the guest on the chartered transportation and they leave the site. And then it's typically about 10 vendors that remain. At the point in the reception, almost all caterers are already off-site. Dishes, trucks, all of that usually is loaded and gone at that time, and it's just the decorative pieces that are left behind. So sometimes the florist comes at the very end of the night, and sometimes everything is set on a tabletop and they get it the following day. But usually tables and chairs and all of that are not broken down that night at a facility like this, and that would be when it's outdoors. Because when it's indoors, of course, they would stay put set up. So.
I mean, I thought that was a good comment that was made. I know for a CUP that we approved a few years ago for a local restaurant on River Road, one of the concerns the neighbors had was that at the end of the night, the staff would take all the empty bottles and put them in bags and throw them in the dumpster. And the neighbors said that was really what woke them up. It's 11 o'clock at night and you're here And we actually, part of the CUP was that they have to they could bag everything, but keep it in the house and then take it out in the next morning before they started preparing for the day. Is there anything that you guys, we could consider some limitations on?
I can actually speak to that. When we host outdoor events and they are neighbors anywhere within a close proximity, we don't allow the bartenders to take that final bag away once the music has stopped. So if that's helpful, basically any other trash they take off-site. Prior to that, it's loaded before the event ends, and then anything else at the close of the event that's remaining in the trash bags, it's tied up and physically left in the bin in place so that it is not a nuisance. And that's noted on our schedules that we give to all the vendors.
So that sounds like a proactive step. I don't know if we need to have language to that in the ordinance.
But, we put them up, tear down, clean up and
Right.
stuff. The restaurant, wasn't necessarily a wedding venue, but Joanne or staff on other wedding venues, and we have cutoff times, how have we handled the breakdown and the cart off? Has there been any?
We just say that they have to end the music at 10 and everybody has to be off site by 11 typically, so we give them an hour to do clean up.
So when the event is supposed to end at 11, they have to clear the site by 11?
So the hours of operation go to 11 PM, so 11 PM, so yeah, this would actually be later than,
I mean, is 11 when they start the tear down?
would be when the event ends, so that would start to tear down.
And we know that some of the events are already occurring, probably end at 11. However, if they would make noise after 11, even people that live there, the folks, they would be subject to the conditions of CUP and potentially could receive a violation for making noise after the hours of operation. And so regardless whether it was cleanup or some other activity, if something occurs after that, it's a citable offense.
So I guess in that respect, considering cleanup an activity-related event, I mean, to the extent there's something at 11:30 or midnight that's tied to that event, then so, I mean, I'm sensing that we haven't specifically addressed that in other cases, other than, isolated incidents where there's a problem, we try to address it.
We had the opportunity because the case came up for a renewal, and that was the one issue that neighbors brought up, one of the issues neighbors brought up.
So that was an issue where we initially had a conditional use permit for a certain period of time. When it came up for renewal, neighbors said there's some post-activity noise making, and then we addressed that as part of the renewal process. So if there were something like that here, that's certainly something we could address specifically in the renewal process.
Like John said, I guess we could deal with it on a violation basis. I'd like to.
Good afternoon. I'm Andy Garrett-Brand. I live at 1511 Riverview Road. As a reminder, I'm the closest property to the tennis courts, 700 feet plus or minus. Mr. Massey is very correct. There is not an excessive amount of noise associated with the events that happened prior at River Run Manor. I've lived in the subject property there for 22 years. And I do recall hearing music through the woods. But it was usually of a more sedate nature. Orchestral music and things of that nature. It was not particularly offensive. The lawnmowers are noticeable, but again, I live in the country. I don't hear ambulances. I'll take a lawnmower. And the breakdown really isn't a major concern of mine, except that my dogs are particularly bothered by backup alarms. And at 11:30 at night, if there's a backup alarm, the dogs are gonna start barking, and then everybody in the house is awake. I don't know if that's avoidable. The other thing is, I think there may be some confusion about event end times versus outside event end times. I do understand you to say that most of your events will be held indoors. And an indoor event that runs till 11 o'clock isn't gonna have the associated noises that DJ playing God only knows what on the tennis court 680 feet from my back deck is. In the wintertime, anything that happens over there is audible. In the summertime, not so much. Leaf canopy dampens that a lot. So really, outside of the conditions of the conditional use permit, we're relying on our neighbors' good graces to guarantee that we're not inconvenienced by the events that happen next door. That's why I think it's important that we, come up with things that are agreeable. And when I say that, I don't mean that, I don't want there to be no noise. I want there to be no disruptive noise. But I also don't want to make the conditions so punitive that these people can't successfully operate a business. Because honestly, like they're saying, I don't know what else is gonna happen to this place. Unless, somebody decides that they're sick and tired of LA and wants to get away from it.
I hit the lottery, I may buy it.
County administration building.
Yeah, the county administration building.
Are we free to just ask a question?
Please.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Susan Smith, River Road. The wine bar is something that concerns me a little bit. I would appreciate him addressing this. I mean, I have this vision of 7 days a week. I think it's 9 to 11, according to what we got, 9 to 10. They're having a wine tasting, popping, people coming and having a good old time in the basement of River Run, then driving away. I don't know how much activity a wine bar has. I'm not a regular goer.
The wine is not part of the CUP. That's a
Okay.
separate process. We're just dealing with special events.
Okay, so, but when the special events comes, this comes with it according to what I understand. Is that correct?
There are some things that they can do by either the state code or the county code if they're an
So we have no
established
control
winery.
over
If they meet conditions.
But if they meet certain conditions, there's things they can do by right.
They can do that
State
anyway.
code.
Yeah,
Yes.
But
They could do that.
special events or not.
they could do that today.
If they meet certain
Yeah.
conditions.
Right, if they meet certain conditions, right.
So there's really no control over that.
Very little, once the conditions are met, very little.
Okay.
Yeah. We could have, we had a meeting earlier with our legislative representatives, that would have been the time to bring that up, because it's a state law. Okay. Any,
Are you closing the public hearing?
yes, I think we've heard from everybody. So, okay, public, I don't think I ever opened it officially, but it's closed. All right, so, thoughts, suggestions, questions?
I'd like us to remember condition number 19, transfer. So we're talking to this particular applicant potential owner of this property and negotiating certain things, talking about certain things. If it's not in this cup application, none of us know what tomorrow brings. None of us. So this property, if it's not written here, this property could be sold to someone else who says, you didn't write it down. So I'm very concerned about these hours of operation, and I'm concerned about this noise, about the panels or whatever. Doesn't say any of that in here. So, protect the neighbors on the sound. I think we have to really be careful on how we do this, because again, this could be sold tomorrow, well, not tomorrow yet, buy it tomorrow, right? Then you can sell. I mean, it could be sold right away for the end of the cup period, and, you know, a new owner could, not do the things that this applicant is saying, that she's willing to do. That's my comment.
Yeah. So I think, I know you've spent a lot of time writing these conditions, but I think we need to add a little bit more.
I have a proposal on what I've heard so far, just, again, not to be different from staff, but to capture what the applicant has said. 12A,
Before Tara goes, I do want to just point out something. You know, what we've done in other ones is we have started out small, and then we have increased through the time.
Exactly.
There is an opportunity to either change that 5-year time limit to something smaller, or if you give them a 5-year period, that doesn't mean the applicant has to wait the 5 years to come forward. They can come back in a year from now after they're operating and the neighbors have had a chance to see it. So I don't want you to be concerned that they never be able to change these conditions if we start small.
Yeah.
Good point.
So I'm not interested in making those changes.
that's fine?
You're not, what?
In increasing the number of times for the outside amplified music. That's where you're going, right?
Yes, ma'am. Simply recording things I'd heard, not making a suggestion to this board, just having recorded what I heard, just to be clear. It's not something I have an opinion about, just.
Do you want to go through what you were, or was that it? Was it just related to that?
Yes.
Okay, John.
No, were you gonna make a recommendation or some thoughts in terms of expanding the hours?
No,
Or you had something, I was ready to hear what you were.
I mean, I was thinking about the flaps or the panels. Do we want to put something in the conditions? But that's only if we're going to allow more than the 6, right? So if we're not going to go beyond the 6 dates, then we kind of said that could happen anywhere. The applicant, it would behoove the applicant to make it so that nobody hears it, so that when they come back for a renewal, everybody says, you know what, I didn't hear it wasn't an issue. So, but if we're not going to increase the days, then I don't see needing to limit it. So the other thing I was thinking was limiting it to the terrace, so it doesn't happen in the front. If it happens in the front of the house, I think that the sound's going to bounce off the house and go north. If it happens in the back of the house, in the terrace or the sub-terrace, then I think most of the sound's going to be pushed towards the river. So if we're going to allow more, I think that's an option. If we're not going to limit it, then I'm not sure that we need to add anything else.
Well, if we're doing it on the terrace only, how many times are you talking about?
Well, we could consider that. We could consider saying, well, 6 is open. Let's do for 20 events, they can do it in the terrace for an hour after the ceremony. Just thoughts.
Ms. Hunt, could you bring up 12B again?
Yes, sir.
You got conditions now, just like we started the other night,
Yeah.
that nobody's gonna be able to follow.
Well,
So this time,
Yeah, I'll tell you where I am on this. I think, I like staff's recommendations. We've spent a lot of time trying to accommodate an application that I think could have been worked on a little bit more in advance and made it a lot easier on everybody involved. I think we've done a lot to try to get to a point. I share your concern. We want them to have a viable business opportunity. So I support 5 years. I don't want to cut to 5 years, but you make the perfect point that if there are things that, if things are going well and they see business need to expand, they can come back, and that's an element where I think we can serve our role in providing some backstop to the concerns that the neighbors have. The 12B, I'm inclined to go with the staff conditions. 12B, I would like to see, Mr. Alvarez, what you said, of the 40 events, amplified sound is permitted behind the house. We can either say on the terrace, if they want to go on that little deck below the terrace, that's fine. That would seem to be even more of a buffer. But I would say on the terrace or behind the house. If they want to go over to the tennis courts, that comes closer to that gentleman's house, I believe. I think we ought to have I don't know, I'm not satisfied we know what a temporary structure is. I think we need to have a four-walled structure if they're going to go, if they're going to use one of their 6 events to go somewhere behind, other than behind the house, then I think that needs to be a four-walled temporary structure.
Is that one of the 6?
We're only talking about 6 events. I don't want to change any of the other, none of the extra cocktail hours or anything like that.
So you take out the word temporary structure.
Ms. Hunter, I think I welcome your help, but of the 40 events, amplified sound is permitted behind the house, comma, either on the terrace or below the terrace, or in a temporary structure, a four-walled temporary structure. The intention being that if they go somewhere other than behind the house, they need to have a buffered structure.
And I pulled up the previous one where it describes that enclosed with temporary barriers is what the term we use. A porch or tent with flags installed on all sides. All of them are temporary, open structures that are, they reference a tent, basically.
I believe Dover Hall is a tent. I mean, I think
Yes.
the reference is a tent.
There's a tent. So we can add that to 12B, that if it's going to be on the tennis court, it would be in a tent or in a enclosed.
Anywhere other than behind the house, anywhere other than on the terrace or below the terrace, it needs to be in an enclosed, whatever words you.
Okay. Well, I understand that.
Your I don't know if it's on 10, but in 10 here we have amplified music is not permitted for accessory events. I'd say we leave that in there if it's not in there. Yep, there it is. That is underlined. That's part of what so I think the only thing that you haven't shown us, you showed us holidays excluded, correct, in item 20?
Yes.
That's fine, and then 21 is
Firearms.
part, so Mr. Chairman, I move that we approve the CUP of CU 2019-0011 with the, as per the staff presentation that we've seen today, correcting the word firearms. And do you want to help me, so we're clear on what we're voting on, to help me express
Sure, so for
condition
12B,
12B?
It would be revised to say, of the 40 events, amplified sound is permitted outside, behind the house, either on the terrace or below the terrace. Or in a temporary structure. I'm gonna pull some language to help me out. Or in a temporary structure that is enclosed on all sides. And for anywhere else on the site, up to 6 times per calendar year. and the outdoor amplification would be limited to a 4-hour period and must end by 10 p.m. So a summary of my understanding of that condition, just to make it clear for everybody, would be of the 40 events, 6 times a year, they could have that outdoor amplified music. They choose whether that is a cocktail hour on the terrace or a larger event on the pool area or tennis courts, and if that's there, they have to have it in a tent with the sides closed. Did I capture that okay, Mr. Lumpkins?
That's correct, and, yeah, you're right, I mean, they could do it a noon to whenever, but 4-hour period, wherever it is, and in no case after 10.
And again, on 10, before amplified music is not permitted. Yeah, and outdoor.
Out outdoor is 10, yes.
A new board could come in also and tell them you can't do anything.
So add the word outdoor before the last italicized part there where it says amplified. I hope that's clearer than the other night. That's my motion.
Is, we have a motion. We have a second.
Second.
We have a motion and we have a second. Any other discussion?
One more thing, Mr. Chairman. Just to be clear, where is the diagram? I was looking for my copy, can't find it. The diagram of the property showing the pool house, the tennis courts, the relationship of the different.
Sure, let me get to that in a moment. Sorry, I'm not at the thing, this machine, so I can't put in the page number. You can probably see it there at the best. So this is the house, the terrace, this is the pool area, and the tennis courts. And the tennis courts is the 700 feet, 730 feet from the pool area to the closest residence.
Okay, so thank you, Ms. Hunt. So behind the house does not include the pool house or the tennis courts, would that be correct?
Correct, so.
Okay, so I believe you had mentioned.
When I say behind the house,
What does
comma,
that mean?
behind the house, comma, on the terrace or below the terrace.
So it could be here or in this area below.
Limited to that.
Behind the house, comma, on the terrace or below the terrace is the intent of my motion.
And again, only.
Below the
six-
terrace, on the
6
terrace or below
times.
the terrace. That's fine, I don't do that.
And that would be up to 6 times outside.
Okay. Any other discussion? If not, Mr. Gillespie, would you do a roll call vote?
Mr. Lumpkins,
Yes.
Mr. Minnick,
Yes.
Mr. Peterson,
Yes.
Ms. Lachelette,
Yes.
Mr. Alvarez.
Yes. Okay. That was so easy. All right, so, the board will then adjourn to Tuesday, October 1st at 3 p.m. for our regular business meeting and 7 p.m. for public hearings. And all those meetings are open to the public, followed by Monday, October 7th, Board of Supervisors zoning ordinance rewrite wrap-up work session. See you all then. Thank you for coming.
That's true. And depending on who they hire, too.
That would have been, at 1 in the morning, I've actually said that, but you'd have regretted that. I'm not saying you've ever said that you regretted it, I'm not regretting it.
It would happen, it's happened early in the meeting.
You guys are something. I had no